What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're just going to answer the question, is Lord of the Rings and the Ring of Power really that bad? To answer that question from the start, no, I don't really think it is as bad as people really presume it is on the internet. I don't get what they watched, but it really just seems like they took everything they did in the series out of context just for their own needs. Anyway, I would just say I'm going to give my honest opinion on it. As a big fan of Lord of the Rings, having it watched it nearly yearly, especially the Peter Jackson version, I love it. I'm going to be talking about the Ring of Power and give my honest opinion on it. So I'm basically going to split up this episode in different little topics. I think they are worth talking about, and we're going to talk about some of the issues. We're going to talk about the good things, the bad things, and of course we're not going to have any spoilers. I'm not going to give any heavy details that is going to ruin your experience watching it, but I do want to talk about some of these elements because I think what some people say is not really true. But anyway, let's deep dive right into it. Let's actually first of all talk about the characters. Now, the characters themselves are quite interesting within the Ring of Power. You can see that it is heavily affected, or I don't want to say heavily, but it is affected by the woke community. They really try to integrate more of an African background as well into the Lord of the Rings, which I still think is okay. I don't think it is as bad as I expected it to be, especially watching the older movies. You don't see anyone with an African heritage. Then again, you don't have to because it's a fairy tale. You know, it doesn't need to include everyone. I mean, that's just crazy. That is just nuts if you think so. Please just stop watching my series if you think that everyone needs to be in a series for it to be modern. I think that's crap. Fantasy is fantasy. A joke is a joke. Don't be too serious on it. You know, just relax a little bit. The one problem that I see though with the characters is that because they integrated these people into the stories, again, they are totally fine, but it seems like every race just needs one person from a special background. In this case, they need a bit of a darker skin tone. I think this is okay, but where is the rest of the people? If you look at all the extra cast around it, there is no one else that is darker skin or has an African background, an Indian background, or something that is quite unique. And I just feel like, did they really just pick one person for each race to be included in it? Because you have one person who is darker skin toned for the elves, you have one for the for the dwarves, you have one for the humans. What's next? Like, are we going to be introduced to maybe like their family or someone with the same heritage? It just feels a bit out of place, and I don't know what to do with it because it makes everything look more unrealistic. And again, it's not the problem that they're there, it's really just that because of the wokeness, it's not really thought out more deeply. So I do hope that we're going to be introduced at one moment to maybe the brothers, the sisters, whatever. It doesn't even have to be family related, but more people from the same background, because right now it just seems a bit awkward. It feels like these people were literally just forced to be in these groups, and I don't know, it doesn't really do it for me. Maybe you guys noticed it, maybe not, but I just want to say this really just it's a bit awkward for me. For the rest, I think the characters are quite okay. For now, they are very dull. The problem that I see with all of them, you know, even with all the different races, they all seem like they have the same more or less attitude. The elves come over a bit, I don't know, they just become over more snobbish rather than more highly appreciated. I always think of elves being very sophisticated, very they're all-knowing, you know, they want to basically understand what's happening, and they want to learn and grow and be better and more efficient every time. But right now I feel as if they are a little bit, I don't know, they feel like they are the same as the dwarves, as the humans. I don't feel a very big difference, especially when it comes to the fighting scenes. There is this moment where a group of elves needs to fight this monster. They fight the monster in one hit, 5 elves die. I don't know what happened to them. Even if they didn't die, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. Watch the series, you'll find out by yourself. I mean, really, I'm not going to give you spoilers, but the point is, one of them only saves the day. Why? Do they want to enforce that, in this case, a lady can save the day and she doesn't need the rest of her team? It feels so disconnected from the elves, because elves always tend to fight together. If you look at any of the Peter Jackson's movies or even The Hobbit, elves are always unified. They're like family. They would strive together to win. It's not about an egoistic journey. It's not about that. You don't need to prove it. But here it feels like they just wanted to prove that one person can do it so that everyone is happy. No idea why. Look, the character's okay. It pulled out some good jokes. I think the characters are somehow lovable, but for a lot of it, they need to develop this a little bit further. I hope that they get away from the dullness and they develop a little bit further into what is about to happen. And again, I only finished episode 2, so let's actually continue. When it comes to the story itself is quite linear at the moment. Like every person has more or less a story happening at the same time. I think this is a very interesting approach. The one part that I just don't like is that a lot of it feels like you're looking at people talking to NPCs, as if people are doing quests. They go somewhere, they come back. They go somewhere, they come back. Do this, do that, do this. It feels a bit, it doesn't feel too crazy, and it makes it a bit boring to follow. Like, it doesn't make it interesting enough, because you're like, okay, they have to go there, then they have to walk back. Okay, that's cool. But I just watched 10 minutes of this happening. Quite dull. They could have maybe made this a little bit more interesting by maybe filming it better as well, because when we come to how it was filmed, there is a bit of a problem where they love including cliffhangers, and I understand why they do it, because they want you to watch it, okay? They want you to watch the end of the episode so you know what happens, but they add cliffhangers during the episode so that you sit down and watch a little bit more so you know what actually happened. Let me give you an example. There is the scene where all of a sudden a challenge happens between a king and someone else, and they do this challenge to prove who's better, and at the beginning of the challenge, I thought, awesome, we're going to see a bit of action, we're going to see a little bit one-to-one, awesome, awesome, awesome. But what actually happens is that they cut away after the first moment, and the time just keeps running. In other words, the challenge keeps happening while we're watching someone else do something else in another part of the world. What the actual hell? Why would I jump from something that's actually quite interesting, you know, a challenge to prove loyalty in this case, and then I jump to a silly adventure on the side? I don't understand why they do this, and I mean, I do understand why they do it, but I do wish that they just don't do that, because it makes it so lackluster to continue watching, because every time something cool happens, your body gets ready, your mind gets ready for it, and they take it away. And it just frustrates me. I don't understand it. They should have a better linear part where they just have action part 1, action part 2, instead of cutting it up in A, B, C of part 1 and then part 2, A, B, C, and they just keep jumping back and forth. It's a little bit awkward, but if you watch it, I think you understand what I mean, and it doesn't do anything good for the series. When it comes to the action, nonetheless, I actually think a lot of the action scenes are quite good. I think a lot of the budget went into CGI. You're making sure that everything looks quite well. I cannot complain about it. I think the action scenes are quite good. You feel the impact. They do very good scenes and trying to make it look as interesting as possible. Of course, some of the scenes, it's always like a small group of people doing something, rather than, you know, with the classical Lord of the Rings, you always have like a bunch of people, like 20, 30 people fighting into a war or something. But here, like I said, it gives more or less that quest feeling, as if one person is the main character, he's gonna slash everything, and that's really it. There is nothing more concrete about it, and of course they have to include the scenes because, hey, it's Lord of the Rings, and who doesn't like looking at these scenes? I think they're quite good, but then again, they could just be a little bit more influential by adding more people into the mix. But again, it's filmed already, we cannot complain. You know, to summarize so far the first 2 episodes, I think the best way to watch it is to really just neglect the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Hobbit, everything. Do not even know that it's there. The main reason is that it really feels disconnected from those other 2 elements. The problem is that with Amazon, they really took that name, Lord of the Rings, and they want to make a series that is based on, for example, what Peter Jackson did. I think it's quite interesting. I think it's very ballsy. Don't get me wrong. They really tried to do their best on it, but I just don't see that connection. What Peter Jackson did really, really good, like he did a phenomenal job on it, is that he really gave a good feeling on what all the different races are and what their strengths are and what the weaknesses are. But here, it feels as if everyone has that same depth, which doesn't really do anything for it, because when I all of a sudden see a scene with the elves, I don't feel like I can highly appreciate them, because they just talk like humans. They don't talk like elves as you would predict them, especially when you read the books. Elves come over as that highly gratitude group of people that always know the answer to things. They will listen. They always, you know, they come over as kings. Even the simple people, even if they're not kings, they look like kings. They're just awesome, especially if you watch Peter Jackson. Again, elves are just pretty fucking awesome. But here, it just feels so disconnected. Like, I never thought I would say it, but humans, dwarves, the footlings, the elves, I don't know, they all just seem the same. And why? Why are they doing this? I think this is the element that is really just destroying it. But if you neglect all the other movies, it's quite okay, because you don't have those expectations that Elf is so good or anything like that. I think Amazon should have really just taken the name Lord of the Rings and they should have just franchised it. They should have just bought the title and do whatever they want with it. That's how I would have appreciated this series a little bit more. Maybe just a different concept of Lord of the Rings. Why the hell not? But here, it just seems like they're doing their best to make it a modern Lord of the Rings, and it doesn't really click that much.